Secretary McMahon, good to see you. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks, Sean, for having me this morning.
You bet. Listen, just to boil this down to start our conversation, in 60 seconds or less, like what is it that people need to know about how you're dismantling the Department of Education and sending the assets back to the states?
Well, the president's executive order was very clear. He wanted me to start dismantling in accordance with the law, the Department of Education. So that means taking a look at where can the functions of the Department of Education, best fit. And that's what we've been doing. As we look at collecting student loans, is that a function that can be handled by Treasury? Title I funding and IDEA funding, which were in place long before there was a Department of Education. Where are students and families best served with those agencies? So we're planning, we're looking at it. We currently are under an injunction now to stop that process, but we're still continuing the planning aspects of it.
For most people, and you just touched on this, they don't understand that we're not talking about not doing certain things. It's where can they be done better, more effectively, more efficiently, right?
Exactly. And I think, what the president's goal is to take the bureaucracy out of education. I've heard people say, oh, he's trying to get rid of education. Well, clearly that's not the case. He wants to raise the level of education. He wants to raise scores. When you think, Sean, we've spent $3 trillion since the Department of Education was first established in 1980, and we've seen test scores continue to decline. We're clearly doing something wrong. We're not servicing our students, and we need to change. And I think we need to reevaluate how education can best be delivered, and I do believe that that's closest to the child, as does the president. With teachers and parents and local superintendents and principals of schools being part of this process and not having it, really dictated by bureaucracy. The federal government only right now contributes about 8 to 10% of the total education budget in each state. So it's not as though everything is, being run from Washington right now anyway, but there's a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of red tape, a lot of regulatory compliance. And if we can get rid of a lot of that, there will be more money that can flow, hopefully, into the states and directly to the students.
It's funny, though, when I think about education and how we run the system, federally, that is, when you're in school, you're graded, right? You get an A through an F. I might have been somewhere in the middle, and if you get like a D or a C, they say, hey, there's going to be another test. Let's see how you improve. That's how we judge students. We figure out, do they need more help, less help? We have a system of grades. That makes a lot of sense. And yet when it comes to the system as a whole, you alluded to this, these testing standards, if we're spending more money and yet we're getting fewer results from our students, and no one seems to look at it, like if this was a student, if we were looking at the education system as a student, we'd say, you need remedial help. We need to do something different. And yet, because it's Washington, we kind of just excuse it.
Well, what has been the practice for so long, the answer is just throw more money at it. And that's clearly not worked. We need to really invest in programs that are going to be very, very beneficial to our students. And what we're seeing, states that are being innovative, that are providing more school choice, more opportunities for parents. Many states are looking at how they are teaching and reverting back to classical education, teaching the science of reading. The state of Mississippi had great results. Louisiana had great results, going back to basics. And I'm seeing a lot of that in charter schools that I visited. Scores are improving. Kids are beginning to learn how to read. Up until the end of the third grade, you're learning how to read. And after third grade, you're reading to learn. And if you cannot master reading, then you're going to really fall behind in learning. And we've seen, reading proficiencies in 8th grade are now at about 30%. That's just incredibly horrible.
Yeah.
That in 8th grade, you can only read proficiently about 30% of the people. And it's just, we have to change that. And so that's what we're encouraging the states to do, providing with tools and best practices. And that's really the obligation of the states, because the Department of Education doesn't teach anyone. We don't set curriculum. We don't hire teachers. We don't buy books. We just are about really trying to guide and be helpful with research and other best practices to help them achieve their goals.
When you look at how kids are learning, who's doing well and who's not, is there a difference either demographically, geographically, or economically?
I think there's always, we've always seen the achievement gap, at least I know I saw it in my state of Connecticut, which it continues to today, that middle class, upper middle class, wealthier communities, we see typically higher scores. But that's why the president is so absolutely focused on school choice. He is saying that no school should be, no child, no student should be trapped in a failing school, one that's not delivering for them. Give them the opportunity to get out, go to another school. Parents are so behind this to make sure that their child has the opportunity for the best education. And that's what the president's directive to education is. It should be more about choice.
One of the things that I keep seeing local school districts around the country, and now even states, is talk about banning cell phones in schools, because there's no question that the phones themselves, social media apps, are a massive distraction, and I think undermine learning and are destructive in a lot of other ways, development-wise. Is there a role, do you think, for the federal government, or should this be done by district, state by state?
I think this is more of an issue that should be handled by the state. I know Congress is talking a lot about it, but governors, there are several governors who are already implementing plans in their states. It's called, bell to bell policy at the schools, so the students don't have their phones in the classroom. I think this is definitely an issue for states or districts to implement.
Do you see, when you talk about the research and all the statistics, like, I feel like one of the stories that we're going to read about in 50 years is the impact that COVID had on learning. And in that sort of 3 or 4 year issue where kids were out of the classroom, they lost some social interaction, they didn't learn the way that they were normally accustomed to. Do you guys see any of that?
Surely. I mean, the impact of COVID is still being felt throughout the country, and it's going to take. I heard one stat one time that it was, a generational issue. It's definitely going to take its impact and toll on those students that were, going into middle school or from middle school to high school. They lost social interaction. They lost, the ability to really participate in class. And I think we've definitely seen it. Research has shown that we must now continue to focus and bring back, that learning for those students. But it's really going to take a while.
Yeah, I'm truly worried, not just about but in 20, 30 years, the impact that's going to have on the whole next generation of Americans, because I don't think we've fully appreciated and realized the damage that was done. And hopefully we've learned the lesson. I know, if I can switch topics, LA and California are in the news for a completely set of crazy reasons. But before LA was in the news and California was in the news for all these riots that are happening there, it was in the news for education, because the Department of Education on last Tuesday, weighed in on this controversy about transgender athletes. I know the Department of Justice, the Civil Rights Division, is going after that. Are you guys working with the Department of Justice? Like, what is the role of the Department of Education when it comes to this whole issue of transgender? And I know a lot of it has to do with sports, but do you guys have a role in it when it comes to learning in classrooms?
Well, sure. There's the sports issue, which we weighed in on relative to California, with the track and field meet. And, the male who competed won 2 state titles. And a female would have won if she hadn't been competing against the male. We pointed out the unfairness of it, but that was fact finding. We did the research. We absolutely found that the California was not complying with Title IX law. And when we have those findings, and we will more than likely turn that over to the Department of Justice for investigation. So, but Title IX was set up to protect women, offer them and to make available to them equal opportunity in sports or education. but that's now, they're being deprived again.
Yeah.
And so when we find schools and we investigate and we find Title IX violations, whatever they are, that is against the law. I mean,
Yeah.
to all things, even reporting them to, accreditors of higher institutions to say these institutions are not complying with Title IX law. They're breaking the law, and you as an accreditor should take a look at that.
You guys have made higher education a priority, going after these universities, these elite universities mostly, because they've allowed this anti-Semitism to fester on their campuses. But I got to tell you, Secretary, how you guys went after Columbia was brilliant. Like, I saw this story pop, and I thought to myself, this is the difference between playing chess and checkers. And let me read the headline to you. It says, Education Department threatens Columbia University's accreditation, invoking anti-discrimination laws. What I mean by this is you guys basically realize that in their accreditation is the key to everything. And that if you can go after the accreditation and get them on a violation of that because they've allowed anti-Semitism to fester on their campuses, then you've really kind of gone at the, as Kamala Harris would call it, the root cause. Walk me through the strategy here, because I literally, when I saw that pop, I said, I cannot wait to talk to Secretary McMahon, because this is so brilliant how you're going after the issue.
Well, we have talked to Columbia, and Columbia was one of the first universities that we sat down with. I met with Katrina Armstrong, who was then the acting president, on the campus at Columbia, and we talked through our concerns relative to anti-Semitism, which was the major flag for us, at the very beginning. And the president campaigned on that issue, that he was not going to tolerate anti-Semitism on college campuses. But it was more than just about anti-Semitism. It was discrimination in general. It was how students are vetted that are coming on campus, how the teachers are vetted. I mean, when I think Harvard's foreign population of students is about 27%. I'm not sure exactly of the population at Columbia, but how do these students come on campus? Are they there to learn? Are they there to be disruptive? And I think we have to make sure of what's coming in, to those college environments. And that was one of the challenges that we have talked to, both universities about. And then we wanted to make sure that we were covering all the steps. So we did provide the accreditor of Columbia with our fact finding that said they were in violation of Title IX and they were breaking the law, and therefore the accreditor should look at that and be sure that the accreditations remained in place, really keeping pressure to make sure that those violations were stopped. It's putting teeth into the measures that you are talking to these universities about, because they accept federal funding.
Right.
And
see, that's the brilliance of it, though.
Yes.
That's why you're so, I'm sorry. I just love how brilliant this was, because you guys basically said, we're not just going to have a dialogue and hope you fix it. We're going to go after your accreditation. And that's got to scare them in a way that no one else has gone after them about.
No, and I will say that we've had great cooperation, with Columbia. We've been sitting down with them. I've had a meeting now with Claire Shipman, who is the current acting president, and I think we're progressing in a good way for a resolution with them to change a lot of the bad habits, if you will, and bad policies that they had, and they're certainly agreeable in a lot of the issues that we've been discussing with them. We did bring up the accreditation issue because that was something that needed to be put on the table. So I think it's been a good effort, back and forth.
So it's you mentioned anti-Semitism, discrimination. What about the DEI policies, the diversity, equity, and inclusion? Is that part of the discussion to say, guys, federal funding isn't here to fund your left-wing woke causes. It's to advance research or to get more kids to learn. Yes,
and universities are responding well, and that they've taken DEI out of their policies, that they've closed DEI offices. They do want to provide counseling, but a lot of the DEI work that they were doing was clearly, diversity and equity and inclusion, you would think, has a great title. Doesn't that sound wonderful? In point of fact, it just wasn't operating that way. It was really segregating more. And when you're teaching and you're looking at one group of students as being oppressed and another group of students as being the oppressors, and that's the way you're approaching these topics, that's just wrong. And so we really wanted to make sure that, again, those colleges and universities accepting federal funding, this cannot be part of their curriculum, not only at higher ed, but also, in K through 12.
When we started this conversation, we were talking about sending the assets back to the states. When you took this job, I honestly can't think of another cabinet secretary in the history of the United States who took a job to say, my job is to put myself out of a job.
Yes.
I mean,
the president told me I'd be successful when I fired myself.
But you're a business person. You have a very successful business history. And I thought to myself, how weird is it when you get hired to fire yourself?
Well, and I talked to the president when he asked me about being the Secretary of Education. I was very flattered, very honored to serve. But I did point out to him, I said, I don't come from the world of education. I've never been a superintendent or professor. He did know that I had my certificate to teach when I graduated from college. I'd majored in French. I served on the Board of Education in Connecticut, and I also served on the Board of Trustees for Sacred Heart University for 16 years. So it's not that I was devoid of any education background, but he said to me, look, he said, I'm not looking for someone to come out of the education department. I need a business executive, a business manager, a leader who can understand how to deconstruct this department, making sure that all of the services get covered, that students get what they need, that education is returned in full, to the states, so that those who are closest to the student can make the best decisions for their education. He said, because I want education in the United States. I want the United States to be the leader in the world in education, not where we are now, woefully close to the bottom.
Yeah. Well, Secretary McMahon, I appreciate you being with us, and the best of luck in putting yourself out of a job.
Thank you, Sean.
You bet, ma'am. Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.